Hi, Klondikers. Welcome to the first episode in our series of talks with the Klondike developers. I am your host, Roman, the community manager. Today, we are chatting with Zhenya, a talented level game designer who contributed to creating many of the locations you loved. Hi, Zhenya.
Yeah, hi everyone.
How are you? How is your day going?
Everything is fine. Development is going according to plan. A new location is being prepared for release. Starting Monday, I'll work on You'll See in a couple of months.
Awesome. That sounds really interesting. I'm always really eager to see what comes out and try playing it. Okay, maybe we should discuss how your work is set up and what locations you've been working on lately.
I start work at the beginning of the production process. Together with the narrative designer, we map out the entire storyline. While they focus on writing the plot, I handle directing the scenes, setting character positions, arranging all objects, creating the atmosphere, and guiding the player to experience a compelling story. I take the location through to its final polish, with full responsibility as the lead location designer resting on me. Recently, I worked on Dead Lighthouse, which is being released as of this recording. I collaborated with another designer on that project. Among my larger locations, the most recent one was Lost Settlement, originally called Lost Sanctuary as a working title. Ultimately, the narrative designer finalizes the names for each location. Over the past year, Frozen Manor and Animal World were also released.
I think Animal World is an amazing update. I remember it resonated really well with our audience and was loved by many players. It was a fantastic achievement.
With each update, the animal-related locations grow, featuring more characters and animals from other locations. We weren't sure what else would include the red pandas, so their role became even bigger.
You mentioned that locations have working titles. What factors determine when and how these working names change, and why can they vary from one another? Why can a location initially have a working title, but the final release may have a different name than the original?
Such a title is created by narrative designers who are responsible for the text and the verbal aspect of the story. As a result, the title may be perceived differently. It could be similar to something else, as seen with titles like Lost Settlement, because initially it was Lost City, which we already had before. The working title emerges during the process to help identify what we are working on among the entire list of locations. It could refer to a seasonal setting, like a summer location, or a site associated with a specific holiday. For example, we already have 4 or 5 locations labeled as St. Patrick's Day in their working titles.
Now, Halloween is just around the corner. What is your overall opinion of this holiday?
Every year, my friends, my wife, and I try to organize or participate in something special because dressing up in costumes is fun. It's always interesting to see acquaintances, friends, and colleagues and guess their costumes. A few years ago, I tried to capture the atmosphere of Fight Club by dressing as the narrator, not Tyler Durden. It was funny when an acquaintance remarked that I looked like a dad who had come home a bit beaten up after a long night.
That's such an unconventional approach, non-trivial, right? It's different from the popular characters that are more obvious choices. That's cool. What about the game? How are Halloween updates generally created and conceived? What usually inspires you as level game designers?
Our inspiration isn't isolated, it often involves collaboration with others. Sometimes we receive specific tasks, such as a theme to explore, and we brainstorm ideas based on that. We work closely with a narrative designer in this process. Our approach can vary depending on our plans, and different methods can be employed. This time, when I worked with Alexei, we brainstormed ideas and decided, to create a location with a nautical theme inspired by myths and legends. Although it's not strictly Halloween and serves as an introduction to the Halloween theme, we aim to evoke the atmosphere of sirens and maritime mysticism. We incorporated elements like Captain Flint, the mysterious disappearance of characters, and a sense of delirium, along with hints at additional stories that won't be directly shown in cutscenes or quests. This allows players to imagine what else might have happened beyond the main plot. This location serves as the main major area for Halloween, although it doesn't have the classic attributes that our players typically expect during the holiday.
You mentioned how the entire process of your work is organized, and I find it fascinating to know how you maintain a balance between complexity and engagement. It's important that players remain interested in the game without facing challenges that are too difficult, which might frustrate them. For example, if the trees and bushes are too hard and costly to cut down, players might feel discouraged.
That's quite a tricky question because as level game designers, we don't directly handle the difficulty. Instead, we manage it. We read and pay attention to all the comments about high difficulty, and we do our best to limit the challenges players face. However, our main goal is to make the game as interesting as possible. We aim to develop the story in a way that keeps players engaged, even in the face of some difficulty. We want them to uncover how the story ends, discover the next twist, and see which characters will appear next. By showcasing compelling graphics, we want players to feel immersed in the events alongside the characters. Instead of viewing everything from a distance, we want them to experience it from a first-person perspective. We strive to convey this atmosphere as effectively as possible, believing that the better we achieve this, the more players will enjoy the location itself. We function as two intermediate parts, bridging the creative and purely technical aspects of development. Our role connects various departments and team members involved in creating the location. We carry significant responsibility to ensure that the location is not purely technical and does not become mechanically passable.
Let's discuss the locations you mentioned working on. Was there any particular location that posed significant challenges during its creation or production? If so, what made it challenging?
I would say that every location presents its own challenges. When you develop an interesting part of a visual story, you open up new opportunities for presentation. However, one location that stands out for me is the Frozen Manor. I worked hard on it with a lot of people, and we put a lot of thought into how to implement it. The story was quite complex and truly existential, with many layers and levels. We needed to provide players with a wealth of additional information through the environment, which can be challenging in the context of our game. Nonetheless, I made it a priority to convey that information effectively. We experimented extensively with the Frozen Manor, exploring various activities and visuals to determine the best approach. The original concept for the story is quite old. Several years ago, we began brainstorming how to incorporate the story of the Snow Queen within the framework of Klondike. And we couldn't come up with anything better than to use a girl, the character who unconsciously used magic and turned the candy and joy factory for the rest of the town into an ice cream factory. And ice cream is hardly needed by anyone, at least in our latitudes during winter. That's why she feels even lonelier. Her personality has split into two separate parts. her teenage pride, which walks around confidently, and the lonely, sad girl in the mansion who is searching for herself. The player had a complex path to navigate, which often zigzagged and flipped. It was essential to clearly indicate where the events were taking place. The experience needed to be engaging, not monotonous. So we alternated between different street areas, highlighting that there used to be a direct path from the city to the factory. It was important to subtly mention this so that it remained in the background. If any players noticed it, I would be very pleased. If not, here is the reason to look for it. If this location becomes available again, try to explore it one more time and find all the similar things that can reveal the story even more deeply.
It's a pity that such complex work requires fitting so much into a cohesive whole, and it's frustrating when it doesn't always succeed. I completely understand this, as creative work often presents the challenge of wanting to do more, while the format imposes certain limitations. In this regard, I want to highlight that it's beneficial for there to be magic in the world of Klondike, both for the storyline and the development of these locations. It provides a way to reference and explain certain parts of the story through magic and magical quests. Sometimes it serves as an interesting loophole, doesn't it?
Yes, but we try not to stray too far beyond certain limits because there are rules governing the single fantastic premise of our world. We also work closely with the narrative designers to avoid overdoing it. If we introduce one oddity, layering on additional ones like 2, 3, or 5 makes it increasingly unnatural. For example, if there is an oddity within one location, such as when Larry recounts how he met leprechauns as a child, and they mistook him for one because of his red hair, it can be effective without overwhelming the narrative. In that context, the only assumption is that he ended up in the world of leprechauns, and everything related to that experience revolves around them. Sudden flying cows on a plate, for instance, wouldn't fit into that scenario.
It's great that there's an internal mechanism for balancing these elements to prevent overuse or excess. Having such a tool is truly beneficial. You mentioned a very complex and interesting location. Now, I'd like to know what you enjoy most about your job. Which specific locations are your favorites? Overall, what part of your work do you find the most exciting or interesting?
The process itself isn't always easy, as it involves many stages and a variety of tools that we use in creation. We have to interact with numerous people, which can be challenging, because our role isn't just about working independently. We also perform some managerial functions. Sometimes we need to oversee the completion of tasks by others. And if we return to the locations themselves, the process doesn't always go smoothly due to the absence of a single standard. We don't want to mindlessly repeat the same thing over and over again. It's important to present a variety of stories because they are primarily created for players who want to enjoy the experience. Games should bring joy to players, unlike some Souls-like games that impose insurmountable challenges. Ultimately, games should be enjoyable. In the process, you become so immersed that there's rarely a moment to pause and say, "This is awesome," until the project is complete. Throughout the creation, there are many questions about whether certain ideas can actually be achieved. And you wait while the art is being finalized, the text is being finalized, and the items and objects are being set up. It's a very long process, and at the end, sometimes during the release and sometimes just before, you look at the final product and see the story you wanted to tell. That's when you can feel a sense of satisfaction. Then comes the anticipation of waiting for players to experience the story, which is crucial because it's important to know whether we've effectively conveyed it to them. For me personally, this stage is significant. At my previous job, even though I was creating something for people, I couldn't see how they perceived it. It felt somewhat isolated. When I became a level designer, I wanted to receive feedback from players about their emotions. Their reactions truly fuel and energize me to continue creating locations and developing engaging stories.
That's great. You mentioned that you really enjoy being able to see and receive feedback from players in your work as a level game designer. What about Easter eggs? Probably for me, seeing players discover Easter eggs I've hidden would be one of the key moments. Generally, how common are Easter eggs in your work? How often do you plan them, or do they appear randomly?
Easter eggs are more often a coincidence, as planning them can be difficult. At the start of the process, the focus is primarily on the technical aspects, which leaves little room for creative work. During the process of forming scenes, you might come across a great opportunity to include a visual joke. For example, there's a meme about frogs that say, "It's Wednesday, my dudes, every Wednesday." In the location Lost Settlement, I placed a frog and asked the narrative designer to create some text for it. If I remember correctly, it was something along the lines of it being a deity of the Wednesday. I found it quite funny and interesting, and I wonder if the players noticed it. There's another silly story that my colleagues often remind me of, and it might be worth sharing since it's a local joke that not everyone understands, but the team finds it hilarious. About a year ago, or maybe a little more, I lost my shoes. Now, in some locations, you can find a pair of shoes with a note saying something like, "So this is where they are," or "found." I can remember in Animal Kingdom. A rather literal visual reference, but at the end of the location we can find there, I think, the third or fourth quest from the end, where we have to get the pandas stuck in lying logs. This is a reference, of course, to Winnie the Pooh. We even rewarded players with a panda that we got out of this log, which is sitting there eating honey, I think. Pandas are so cute, we couldn't pass up the opportunity.
That's really cool. You're not missing any opportunities. Easter eggs are fantastic, and as a player, not just as a community manager, I love discovering them when they're hidden. It brings such joy. I hope our players enjoy them too. And I'm especially curious to hear if they've found some of the Easter eggs you mentioned. Well, it was a very interesting conversation, and I think we can wrap it up here. Thank you very much to Zhenya for joining us today and sharing insights about his work and various intriguing moments. It was truly great.
Yes, it was nice to be here. Bye.
Thank you very much for watching our first episode of Talks featuring Zhenya, our level game designer who has contributed to the creation of many interesting locations that you continue to enjoy. If you have any questions or ideas about what we could discuss in future episodes, or if you have suggestions for guests, please share them in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Thank you again, and see you soon.